Welcome to today's edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show podcast.
Welcome in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. It's Thanksgiving Eve. We are thankful for all of you and appreciate the fact that you are spending your Thanksgiving Eve with us. We know that many of you may be listening as you are driving or flying across the country, maybe even around the world, and we certainly appreciate all of you for hanging out with us, and we are fans of you and everything that you guys have allowed us to do so far this year. So Buck and I both very thankful for all of you. We want you to be safe while you are traveling around the country. I've seen some photos and videos from airports all over the country, and it's really kind of crazy to see how many of you are out and about. Buck is in New York. I am in Nashville. We'll be celebrating with our families close to home, and we can't wait to be able to do that. So we've got a lot to dive into. I'm going to open up phone lines, have a fun time with you guys on Thanksgiving Eve here. 800-282-2882 if you want to react to us. We're going to head out to Qatar, and I believe that is the official pronunciation that Fox has decided on, Buck.
I mean, for the Arabic speakers out there, it's Qatar. But we're Americans, so we call things whatever we want. It's not the University of Notre Dame. It is Notre Dame. Same idea.
They had a full article, I think, on in the New York Times that I read in the last couple of days about how the pronunciation of the country, there's like 7 or 8 different ways to pronounce it depending on what angle you go with. But we are going to Doha, which is the capital of Qatar, and we will talk to Alexi Lawless, who is a Fox soccer analyst, in advance of what should be a really fun Friday. I know many of you will be watching a lot of sports Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday as you eat your turkey, kick back. I actually, Buck, just came from my kids and a bunch of other neighborhood kids in a mass football game. They are all out of school, and first thing they want to do, my 8-year-old, my 12-year-old, and my 14-year-old are all a part of the same game. Big game breaking out. I'm sure many of your kids are out. Hopefully they're running around and having a fantastic time.
So I have cousins who had I grew up right in the middle of Manhattan. I lived right in the concrete jungle, right in New York City. And we would go out. I had cousins that had a big place, like a house, like how people live in houses.
Yeah, you're still stunned by how people live in houses. Yeah,
yeah. They had a yard.
Yeah,
and
they had grass.
There were not like 15 or 20 floors of people living above and below them. They just had a house, and they had a big dog. But I remember we'd play basketball and even throw a football around, but we'd have to wear jacket and tie for Thanksgiving and Christmas as a family, the little kids. You remember the days when you could just go out there, no stretching, no,
oh, yeah.
Now I'm like, oh man, I need like 4 minutes of like self shiatsu on my lower back before I could even pick something up off the ground. Back then, man, Thanksgiving, my cousins, we were all the same age basically, throwing around footballs, playing 4-on-4 basketball. It was America.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I bet we have a lot of people who work in hospitals for Thanksgiving. And first of all, we appreciate everybody who doesn't get Thanksgiving off and has to work. We know that as many of you out there listening to us right now, keeping the country running. But the amount of people who come in with Thanksgiving family football injuries, very often older guys whose hamstrings give out, maybe the ACL doesn't stretch as well as it used to, massive numbers of injuries, such that, Buck, I told my boys, I was like, hey, when we finish the show today, I'll get back out. We'll play some football. It's like 65 degrees here in Nashville. Perfect day. But I said, Dad is all-time quarterback. Only thing I'm risking is the shoulder. I'm not getting out trying to run routes. I'm certainly not trying to keep up with my kids and chase them down and get the 2-hand touch tags on. So Dad is like a hired gunman, just stands there with the old school quarterback, all-time QB, both sides. And gets blamed anytime he throws an interception or doesn't make a perfect throw by every kid on the field. who is always judging the QB. So that is what's going on here. You came out. We kind of live in a utopian, like kids run around. It's like Goonies every day in this neighborhood. And so I know many of you will be gearing up for those games. And I hope, again, as I mentioned, I know many of you are in your cars right now, traveling to see the grandparents, traveling to see the kids, everybody
I think they said
out
40
and about.
million on the roads.
Woo.
A few more million in the planes, and a couple million on the buses and the trains. I mean, people are moving. This is the first Thanksgiving that we've had where you'll have about as many people going as pre-pandemic era.
Would you
2019.
prefer to travel on Thanksgiving or just stay home? What's your preferred? Now, you're just getting married, so the family dynamic can alter whether you want to travel or stay home.
This is the last solo with my family Thanksgiving that I will have, and Carrie is with her family. And then we're going to have to do Clay, you're going to have to advise me on this. Clay is going to be marriage consigliere, you know? We'd be like, Clay, how do we do this? Do we break down Christmas, Thanksgiving? Is that a one package? Is it two different things? Do you go all in one year? What about New Year's? You know, I got to work all these things out.
It makes a big difference, and I know those of you out there traveling right now, once you add kids to the travel routine, it makes a big difference. Because it's kind of easy to go back home when it's just you and the wife or just you and the girlfriend or whatever else. But when you start adding in multiple little people and their schedules, it gets way more complicated.
Yes. And I also will tell you, I mentioned this because I flew back into New York today. I'm here in New York City, Midtown. And there were a lot of people that were wearing masks, which is unsurprising. When I say a lot, maybe 10%. I'd say 10% of the flight, which to me is... But I've also noticed that there are now people who really get into, like, the N95 mask with the two rubber straps. I saw at least 4 or 5 people with this, where it is so tightly affixed to their head that you can see the line of the rubber in the back of their scalp and kind of a, you know, like they're just, it almost looks like a form of self-asphyxiation. And I feel very sorry for these people because clearly there's something wrong here. And this also brings us to why we were both, I mean, I don't know if anything was getting us more fired up yesterday on the political scene for sure than the Fauci
I'm
final
still so
press
angry
conference.
at that man.
Because
that little elf.
if he came out and said that it really is, guys, you really don't have to do this stuff anymore. But I won't even, at this point, Clay, I won't even demand that he admit he was wrong about everything, that he's horrible, he's an evil smurf, he's the worst bureaucrat in the history of the country. I won't even get into it. He could just come out now and say, you don't have to do this craziness anymore. And I would at least give him a little bit of credit for not making people suffer through this madness anymore. I'm telling you, a lot of people walking around in New York still with masks on.
And you know what, Buck? That's such a good point because this is his final public event. If he had any semblance of decency, he would have come out and said, hey, you know what? We are very fortunate now in the third Thanksgiving. This is the third Thanksgiving since COVID hit. You really don't need, if you analyze your risk factors, to be wearing masks to Thanksgiving dinner. You really don't need to be doing testing. You can get back to 2019 era Thanksgiving. If you're sick and you don't feel well, hey, don't go to Thanksgiving. I just got a text message. My brother-in-law and my niece, they have the flu. Probably not going to hang out with them, just like you wouldn't have for the last 20 or 30 years of your life. Somebody's sick. You say, okay, we'll change plans. But if you feel well, you don't need to change your behavior just like you would have done back in 2019. Buck, this was his opportunity to in some way declare victory and embrace a return to normalcy. He didn't do it. And as a result, the 25 or 20% or 30% of broken brains out there, they're never going to go back to normal.
So I also want to point out that D.C., which is a political echo chamber, monoculture. I mean, D.C. is 95%. I think it is now officially more Democrat than San Francisco. Our nation's capital, everybody. More left-wing, more Democrat-heavy even than San Francisco. It might be within 1 or 2 percentage points of each other. Maybe San Fran has a point or two on it. But they're right alongside each other, okay? And we've all thought, San Francisco is the most left-wing major city in America for a long time. Clay, the D.C. public schools are requiring negative COVID tests for people to return after Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
so,
I saw this.
First of all, what a massive waste of time and resources. And I guess the idea here is, we're going to test you after Thanksgiving because that's so much more dangerous for COVID spread than everyone just living their lives and getting COVID all the time, which is happening anyway. Then this would be like, it would be like saying you're not allowed to come back to school until we give you a test for the common cold. And you say, okay, but I'm probably going to get a cold in 2 weeks, or, you can't stop this. So what is this even doing at this point? But I think these have now become rituals of the Democrat apparatus. This has become a thing that people do because it makes them feel good. The same way that no one really thinks that Florida is going to fall into the ocean because of climate change and that recycling is really saving anything. But they do it because, it's a ritual. It's like a religious ritual. You did it make you feel good. For people now, super tight N95 masks and totally unnecessary testing for COVID is also a ritual.
I'm glad you brought that up, too. I'm reading right now, right before we came on the show. I couldn't believe that this is out there, but Washington Post headline. We've been telling people this for quite some time. Vaccinated people now make up a majority of COVID deaths. Subheadline. It's no longer a pandemic of the unvaccinated. I'm reading from the Washington Post. For the first time, a majority of Americans dying from coronavirus received at least the primary series of the vaccine. 58% of coronavirus deaths in August were people who were vaccinated or boosted. This is pretty, it's pretty significant. And so, again, we've been telling you this was the case for some time. But when you had Ashish Jha yesterday at the White House saying, hey, if you get your COVID booster, you won't die of COVID, that's a lie. Even the Washington Post now is saying, and this was back in August, I'm sure the numbers are even more substantial now, unfortunately. And we should mention many of these people are dying with COVID. They are wildly unhealthy. You're dying with 3-4 comorbidities along the way, and COVID is one of them. It's not COVID exclusively, but it does continue to puncture this public health argument they've made where if you get the COVID shot or you get your boosters, it's just a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's not true.
Well, it hasn't been true for a long time, and what you're going to see is they just slow roll the data and the analysis of it and the distribution of the obvious facts or the obvious conclusions that come from all of this until it is more palatable to their audience, right? The Washington Post could have said this 6 months ago.
Correct.
Their whole thing about, for the first time, that's not true. That hasn't been true in a lot of places across the country since last winter when the pandemic was having yet another phase. First of all, it's not even a pandemic anymore. Unless, Clay, excuse me, sir, unless it comes to, emergency powers and maybe student loans.
Which that won't ever go away.
Then apparently it's an emergency forever, which we should talk about. So talk about this one. Just deferring the loans again, tens of billions of dollars because Biden feels like it. Folks, we're thankful for a lot, but the poor governance of the Biden administration is not one of those things. We'll talk about both the things we're thankful for and the things we wish weren't so today on the show. Millions of businesses have benefited from the convenience of having Stamps.com services. This is a one-stop website that makes it possible for you to ship boxes and letters, literally anything you need delivered. They give you access to both USPS and UPS services, and their pricing discount on shipping is high. It can be as much as 85% off. For regular mail, you can print stamps, weigh packages, and make it so you never have to stand in line at the post office again. For shipping via UPS, the Stamps.com website lets you schedule pickups of every last box you need to ship. This holiday season, trade late nights for silent nights. Get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with our promo code Clay and Buck for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code Clay and Buck.
They're here to shed light on the truth every day. Clay Travis and Buck Sexton.
Welcome back to Clay and Buck. You know, there are people out there who took big stands against, well, the vaccine mandate, of course, and people took a stand against masking at different times, all this stuff. But there were some surprises, I think, along the way. People like Novak Djokovic, who is probably the best tennis player in the world today, very much refused to get the vaccine, even at the cost of not being able to compete in the Australian Open and that whole kerfuffle. There was also Kyrie Irving of the Nets, the NBA player. Clay is nodding as I go along here. Yes, right? Kyrie Irving
I'm impressed. Yes.
Yes, thank you. A very excellent guard on the Brooklyn Nets team of basketball. And then there was also someone who I think most of us know better from his work really back in the 90s. But Ice Cube says that he turned down $9 million because he refused to get the COVID shot. Let's hear from Mr. Cube.
I turned down a movie because I didn't want to get the motherfucking jab. You know, I turned down $9 million. Damn. Because I didn't want to get the jab.
You didn't want to get,
that jab. And y'all for trying to make me get it. So, I don't know how Hollywood feel about me right now. You know what I'm saying?
Now, Clay, while we may have use less salty language in our discussions about the jab, Mr. Cube does have a point here, which is that they were very aggressive about trying to make people, especially in media and Hollywood, get the shot, which now we all understand. It not only does it not stop the spread, doesn't really work very well, if at all. If at all.
If at all. And there are, I think, increasingly a lot of free thinkers out there that looked at the data. And they can be from a variety of backgrounds, right? I don't know what Novak Djokovic, Ice Cube, Kyrie Irving, and Aaron Rodgers, all four, and Clay Travis, for that matter, all five of us have in common at all, right? Most of those guys I don't know at all. A few of them I know a little bit. But for us to all come to the same conclusion on the COVID shot, I think, again, from wildly different backgrounds with different professions, I think it's been totally under-discussed how diverse and totally from different worlds many of the people who reached the same conclusion have come from. And we were just talking about suddenly the Washington Post having to acknowledge, hey, remember last winter, Buck, they made a big deal. It's winter of death. It's a pandemic of the vaccinated. No. Pandemic of the unvaccinated. Now the Washington Post is saying, actually, vaccinated people are more likely to be dying now. To be fair, there are more people who have gotten a shot than not in the United States, so the percentages are out there. But I've had it twice. I'm not very afraid. Yeah.
What did Dr. Jaw say yesterday? We can eliminate basically all deaths if people get the booster shot. That's not true. It's just a lie. So how can you expect people to continue to go forward and listen to these clowns?
You can't. And I give credit to Ice Cube for joining the ranks of those who are willing to publicly condemn this shot. Look, common sense, well, it often prevails. If you could save 50 or 60% every month on your cell phone bill and still receive the exact same quality, wouldn't you do it? I would, and I have. Pure Talk will provide you with great cell phone service, same nationwide 5G service that one of the big companies will offer, but for less than half the price. That's because Pure Talk doesn't have thousands of retail stores to fund or stadium sponsorships to pay for. Pure Talk's customer service teams also all located here in the United States, part of a company led by a U.S. veteran who leads that company and believes in family values. They also believe in giving you great service at a low cost. Simple to switch. You can keep your same phone number and your same cell phone. All you have to do, dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck to save 50% off your first month. Again, dial pound 250 right now from your phone. Say Clay and Buck. Make the switch to Pure Talk.
Buck Sexton on the front lines of truth.
Welcome back in. Thanksgiving Eve edition, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton show. As I continue to say, we are very thankful for all of you and hope that you and your families have fantastic Thanksgivings and travel safely to wherever you may be going to meet with those friends and family. We talked some about the shooting out in Colorado, and the immediate way that it was politicized, everybody out there decided, the right-wingers are to blame for this shooting that took place at a gay club. And again, credit to the people in that club who managed to keep that shooting from continuing. There are many heroes there. But if you turned on CNN, if you turned on MSNBC, if you read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the usual suspects, NPR, they all said, Fox News is to blame. Conservative talk radio is to blame. Right-wing influential figures have blood on their hands. Then something interesting happened late last evening. I was sitting around watching the newest version of the Santa Claus, Buck. My boys are obsessed. You watched the Santa Claus back in the day, the Tim Allen Santa Claus-based movie? Or was that after your time?
You're really putting me on the spot here, Chief. I have never seen the Santa Claus. Should I see this movie?
Save it for the kids. When you and Carrie have kids, they will probably love the Santa Claus. Tim Allen, spoiler alert, is Santa Claus. And there's a new Disney Plus special that's out with Tim Allen where they're counting down till Christmas. I know it's the day before Thanksgiving, but my boys are obsessed with Christmas already.
What is the... Well, you know what? We'll come back to Christmas movies and Thanksgiving movies later.
So I'm watching this. We'll talk about it in a sec. But I'm watching this when, out of nowhere, on my phone pops up a news alert. And that news alert lets me know that the shooter is actually in court filings claiming to be transgender. Here is CNN, Cut 20, reacting to the news late last evening that, wait a minute, the shooter might not have been some Tucker Carlson watching MAGA enthusiast Donald Trump supporter, might have actually been also transgender. Listen.
Attorneys for the accused shooter, Anderson Lee Aldrich, say in new court filings tonight that the suspect now identifies as non-binary. In a footnote to a motion asserting legal privileges, the public defenders say, quote, Anderson Aldrich is non-binary. They use they, them pronouns, and for the purposes of all formal filings will be addressed as Mix Aldrich. So in other words, not Mr. or Ms. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's not anything that we had heard from his background. You know, people have been looking into his background, and I don't know if anybody here, are you guys lawyers? I mean, you know, I don't know if, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's what he's now saying.
I also, a few things here. One is, I believe the individual here is considered non-binary, not transgender, right? Meaning in between, it's not someone who is going from female to male, but believes...
you may be right about that. I don't... So I get all confused on this terminology,
Clay,
frankly.
Everybody gets, you know,
so
obviously.
what is non-binary versus transgender?
So non-binary means neither quite fully on the female side of the spectrum or the male side of the spectrum. Cisgender would be if you are one or the other, also known as gender. If you're male or female, that is cisgender. Non-binary is you're in some middle ground between the two genders. So a couple of interesting things that this brings up. I mean, one is just, and look, I understand, right? I mean, I even saw people saying, you know, well, we shouldn't, this isn't like some kind of a gotcha moment. Hold on a second. People on the right were the ones who were saying, including you and me, what happened in Colorado Springs is horrific. We should come together and grieve as a community. We should show support to the human beings, the men and women and LGBTQ individuals who are there. The Army veteran who took down the shooter should be praised for being a hero. That's how we wanted to talk about this and cover this incident. And if there's something, there were, by the way, red flag laws in Colorado, didn't stop this individual. There are some security and procedural issues to discuss to try to prevent such a horrific thing from happening in the future. We're not going to stop all of these, as we know, but we can talk about how we might be able to stop it and discuss that in a serious and sober-minded way. It was the Democrats who were saying this is Lauren Boebert's fault. It was the Democrats who were saying this is Tucker Carlson's fault. They did this right away. And so, you know, if you are at a funeral and someone yells at you that you are responsible for the death of the person that is being mourned, you're going to defend yourself, right? You're going to say, I didn't do, you know. So I think it creates this unfair standard where now we're being told, hey, guys, let's not, you know, let's focus on the issues at hand here, not get too deep into the pushback to the media. No, I'm sorry. They weaponized the narrative. It was wrong. They jumped to a conclusion that fit their, and they slandered people. And now what was fascinating, you might have seen this, Clay, on social media. Initially it was, well, clearly this person, Aldrich, clearly this person's just doing this as some kind of a troll
Defense.
of the court.
Or defense. Yeah.
Or some kind of defense. Not true. This individual wanted to change his name at the age of 16. This stretches back for years. This was not something that just they stumbled upon in this moment. And I also think it raises issues. Why should the court accede to this? Why should I mean, as far as the court is concerned, there are men, there are women, there are differences in law that affect men and women. And the claim that somebody has to be referred to by different pronouns, in fact, plural pronouns, I really mean this. The New York Times has even had this discussion in the past. Using plural pronouns is grammatically incorrect and confusing.
Yes.
And in a court situation, to be confusing the jury with plural pronouns when an individual committed a heinous act is confusing. If I were, let me give it sorry, I'm just obviously fired up about this, Clay. If I were accused of a serious crime, and I kept saying, you can't refer to me as the defendant. You have to refer to me as the victim, because that's how I identify. I identify as a victim. You say, well, no, of course not. That's going to confuse the jury. You don't get to make up the language that other people in a court of law use to discuss a legal proceeding. I got big problems with that.
No, I think you're 100% right about this. And from a legal perspective, you can imagine how the jury could be confused in a big way. It's actually a tremendous advantage to the defendant, because every time you refer to the defendant, if you say they, it makes people think that more than one person was
Correct.
involved in a crime, right? So if you say they did this shooting, then my initial response is, like, who are the shooters, plural, directly, and I'm sure most people sitting on a jury would be. And also, if you're reading the transcripts as a lawyer, which I used to have to do, when you're using a plural, you are constantly thinking in your head, okay, wait a minute, did I miss something here? Is this multiple people who were involved? Is this one person who was involved? All of it's crazy. And I think it also ties in with what we said on this program, which is this is unfortunately just further evidence of the mental illness that I believe is likely involved in the behavior of this shooter.
That's another issue that I have from a pure legal and justice system perspective on this one. Every time, to your point, Clay, yes, it could be they. So were there multiple shooters? It's confusing, as you just discussed. Absolutely true. But also, it raises this idea that there is perhaps a collective responsibility. They did this terrible thing, but, they have a long history. Well, who is they exactly, right? It diffuses responsibility for the individual acts. And I would say even, in some ways is also a stealth, I'm just going to say it, a stealth mental health defense. The jury's going to be hearing all the time about this person who insists on being called they. If I'm a juror, I'm sitting there saying, okay, this person is mentally unbalanced. That's what's going to happen. So it's a way of introducing a sort of insanity defense without actually doing that, because the person also, what was it? What was the preferred, not Mr. or Mrs., but
MX.
MX?
MX.
Right. No, I know. I'm saying.
I don't even know how you pronounce it.
I mean, if I went into a court of law and I wanted them to refer to me, everyone knows we could all fill in the blanks here. This is crazy stuff that's going on, but also the fact that they lied about this right away and put this on specific individuals. I'm just going to say this: AOC, wasn't she the one who called out?
She went
Boebert?
right after Boebert. Yeah.
AOC, if she has a shred of honor or integrity, should publicly apologize to Congresswoman Boebert. This is not just a political partisan. That is actually the case here. If she will not apologize, she is a person of no honor or decency.
And we know, by the way, that she will not apologize because she does have no honor or decency. Worse than that, even than her failure to apologize, Buck. None of these people who jumped to conclusions about the motivations of the shooter are going to be held accountable by the media either. Right? All these people who went on CNN and MSNBC and attacked Fox News and attacked Congresswoman Boebert and went after all the different right-wing, as they describe it, commentators, there are no consequences now that they are proven wrong. I find it hard to believe that this shooter is a Tucker Carlson viewer or a, Daily Wire subscriber or a Clay and Buck listener. And yet that is what they are going to try to ascribe as the motivation. They're not going to have to own the fact that they were wrong.
They tried to use this shooting to further leverage the narrative that Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter is dangerous and leading to people dying. I mean, everything they could fit this into, they did. And look, there's a reason why Russia's concept of the drive-by media is so accurate and so timeless, because when you think about it in that context, the media they unleash this devastation of lies and they just speed off until the next one. No accountability whatsoever. So we finally have more information about this. We'll continue to follow this one closely. Switching gears, my friends, if your business has 5 to 500 employees and you managed your way through the pandemic and this recession we're already in, you could be eligible to receive a payroll tax rebate of up to $26,000 per employee. This isn't a loan. There's no payback. It's a refund of your taxes. How do you get your business this refund money? Go to getrefunds.com. Their tax attorneys are specialists in this little-known payroll tax refund program. They do all the work with no charge up front and simply share a percentage of the cash they get for you. Businesses of all types can qualify, including those who took PPP, nonprofits, even those that had an increase in sales. The team at GetRefunds.com has already returned over $1 billion to businesses, and they can help you as well. Just go to GetRefunds.com, click on Qualify Me, and answer a few questions. This payroll tax refund is only available for a limited amount of time. Don't miss out. Go to GetRefunds.com. That's GetRefunds.com. No risk, high reward.
The torch of truth, passed and still lit every day. The Clay, Travis, and Buck Sexton Show.
Welcome back to the Clay, Travis, and Buck Sexton Show, everybody. A lot to talk about today, and in particular, I got to say, we were discussing the student loan situation for a second there. I just want to come back to this because the Biden administration, we've gone from hold on a second, why are we pausing? Because we're in a pandemic. All right. I think that was a sketchy argument, Clay, in the first 6 months. I mean, from, February of 20 or March of 2020 until, let's say, end of summer, basically the fall. I found it unpersuasive, really, but okay, maybe, given that they were doing PPP and all these other things, fine. The fact that they are officially extending this state of emergency, and then they're also officially extending the student loans delay. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, this is flagrantly not in the power of the presidency, unless you're just going to declare a forever COVID emergency and make it up as you go along, which is kind of what they're doing.
Yeah, and credit to the Senate. I don't know that we talked about it very much on the show, but 62 senators, which is hard to get a vote for 62 senators to agree on anything, have voted that the pandemic emergency should be over, including, crazily, Chuck Schumer. And the other part of this that's wild to think about, Buck, is remember Joe Biden went on 60 Minutes back in September and said COVID's over. And a base part of the Democrat Party was unwilling to accept that COVID could be over. And it undercuts his argument on behalf of student loans and many other executive actions that he has taken, including certainly loan forgiveness for student loans, to be arguing in September, hey, COVID's over. And I think they've extended it now until June, Buck, which means that COVID, and we can check on that and make sure I'm right, but I think it extends all the way the emergency does now till June. COVID is 3 years in by the time that this, is it 3 years? Yeah, 3 years in by the time that this thing is continuing. You heard me try to do math in my head. The same reaction I had yesterday when Dr. Fauci had his goodbye press conference, and he's telling us for a third straight Thanksgiving, hey, you should be wearing a mask and testing, and you can't have a normal Thanksgiving. That's a good question. What percentage of people going to Thanksgiving tomorrow do you think are doing a Thanksgiving that is almost identical to what the Thanksgiving would have looked like in 2019?
5% of Americans, I think, are still living in this delusion that they have to obey all the dictates
So you think
of Fauci.
95% of Americans are like back to normal for Thanksgiving?
Pretty much. I think that the proportion of people, and this is I just got off a plane, right? The proportion of people that still mask sometimes in some places a little higher. The proportion of people who think that, you know, maybe they should get and maybe their kids should get. Well, actually, the kids, as we know, that was
Nobody's
really
getting.
a breaking point here in the whole Fauciite regime was, you know, when Fauci's going around saying, get your toddlers shots 3, 4, and 5. A lot of people walking around saying, I don't think so. I don't think I want to get my kids the shot at all because
most people didn't get it at all.
It's right. I mean, and that was in the 96, 97% range. People didn't get the shots for their kids. It was fascinating. That was also a time, though, where Twitter was still under the firm grip of the commissars.
Yes.
We should talk a little about what is it? Trust and safety. If you were trying to come up with an additional chapter for George Orwell's 1984, it could have been the Trust and Safety Committee at Twitter, right? Which is just suppressing ideas they don't like. But they were elevating all these parents who were blue check libs, not that the blue check means the same thing anymore, who were having their little toddler, tears streaming down their faces. They're getting jabbed with a COVID vaccine. And the look of glee on some of those parents' faces. They are deranged libs who need to stop watching MSNBC. That's the truth.
I actually saw Nate Silver, who some of you may know. He's a prognosticator, data analyst, kind of flip out on Twitter this week saying, essentially, these people who claim that they're checking for misinformation are actually the biggest purveyors of misinformation on social media. And I was like, yes, they are 100%. And certainly Elon Musk has come to that realization. And I think if you are a rational, sentient, normal human being, you are looking around now and saying, man, a lot of these people who claim to be looking at misinformation are severely broken individuals who are spreading misinformation more than almost anyone.
They've lived in these echo chambers of leftist orthodoxy for so long, their entire lives, that when they're actually forced to grapple with opposing ideas, it really just overrides the system, and they want to crawl into a fetal position and freak out. Let's talk a little about Elon. I think Elon is changing the way discourse happens online, Clay, in a good way.
I do, too. It's fantastic.
Clay Travis and Buck Sexton on the front lines of truth.